No one talks about what broke first, the body or the mind. Pirates stranded for months didn't just face hunger, they faced themselves. What mental tricks kept them sane? And what did they do when even hope turned into a threat? Most pirates didn't end up stranded on desert islands because they wanted a vacation from pillaging and plundering. Nope. These poor souls found themselves abandoned after mutinies gone wrong, ships smashed against hidden reefs, or, and this was probably the worst, deliberately marooned by their own crew as punishment for breaking the pirate code. Getting dumped on a random Caribbean island wasn't exactly like being dropped off at a resort. These places sat hundreds of miles from the nearest town or shipping road. You could shout until your lungs gave out, and the only thing that might hear you would be a confused iguana. The really unlucky pirates got the full Robinson Crusoe treatment. Stripped down to nothing but their torn clothes, maybe a rusty knife if they were fortunate, and boots that had seen better decades. Some didn't even get shoes. Imagine trying to survive on jagged coral and burning sand while barefoot. Makes you appreciate modern footwear, doesn't it? But here's where it gets interesting. The smart pirates moved fast once their feet hit that sand. First thing they did, scout the coastline like their lives depended on it. Because, well, they did. They needed to spot any immediate dangers lurking around. Wild animals, hostile natives, or worse, enemy ships that might decide one stranded pirate would make good target practice. Then came the frantic search for hiding spots, caves, thick vegetation, rocky overhangs, anywhere they could duck and cover when trouble showed up. And trust me, trouble always showed up eventually. The truly clever ones had already stashed secret supply caches around various islands before getting marooned. These pirates played the long game, knowing that betrayal was as common as seawater in their line of work. Hidden barrels of hardtack, tools, even weapons, buried like treasure, but meant for survival instead of spending sprees. Unfortunately, most pirates weren't that forward-thinking. The majority started their island adventure with absolutely nothing. Zero. Zilch. Not even a decent hat to keep the blazing Caribbean sun from cooking their brains. They had to make do with whatever the island offered, and Caribbean islands could be surprisingly stingy with their gifts. Some got lucky and found remnants from earlier shipwrecks scattered along the beaches, broken barrels, scraps of sailcloth, maybe a bent sword or two. Others discovered that previous castaways had left behind useful items, or sometimes, unfortunately, just their sun-bleached bones as a warning about how this survival thing might go. But whether they started with hidden supplies or empty pockets, every stranded pirate faced the same immediate crisis: the blazing sun, the endless ocean, and the terrifying realization that rescue might never come. And speaking of immediate crises, nothing killed faster than the one thing most people take completely for granted. Nothing kills a stranded pirate faster than thirst. 3 days without water, you're done. Game over. The Caribbean sun doesn't mess around, and neither did these desperate sailors when it came to finding something to drink. Smart pirates hit the ground running, literally. The moment their boots touched sand, they'd scout every inch of coastline looking for streams or springs. Fresh water bubbling up from underground was like striking gold. But here's the thing most people don't realize. It was incredibly rare on small islands. So what did they do? They got creative. Really creative. Early buccaneers learned a neat trick from watching local animals. They'd dig holes about 3 or 4 feet deep in damp sand, especially near beaches where the ground stayed moist. Sometimes brackish water would seep in. Not perfect, but better than dying of thirst. The key was digging above the high tide line where rainwater collected in the sand layers. Then there's the rainwater game. Pirates turned into amateur engineers overnight, using whatever they could find. Torn sails became funnels. Coconut shells transformed into collection bowls. Even their own shirts got pressed into service as water catchers during tropical downpours. But the really desperate times, that's when things got interesting and gross. Morning dew became liquid gold. Pirates would drag cloth across wet grass at dawn, then wring it out into containers. Not exactly refreshing, but it worked. Some learned to cut into certain plants and trees that stored water in their bark or leaves. Palm hearts held precious drops, and even some cactus varieties could provide moisture. And the weird part is, they sometimes resorted to turtle blood. Yeah, you heard that right. Sea turtles were walking water bottles to dying pirates. Not exactly a fine wine, but when you're hallucinating from dehydration, Standards dropped pretty quickly. The smartest pirates set up multiple collection systems. They'd have do-rags working at sunrise, rain catchers ready for afternoon storms, and maybe a sand well as backup. Diversification wasn't just for investments, it was for staying alive. Makes sense, right? You can't hunt food or build shelter if you're passed out from dehydration. But here's what separated the survivors from the corpses. They learned to ration. Even when they found water, disciplined pirates would force themselves to drink slowly and save some for later. The temptation to guzzle everything immediately was overwhelming, especially after days of dry mouth and cracked lips. Some got lucky and found natural rock basins that collected rainwater. Others discovered caves with underground pools, but most had to work for every single drop they consumed. Well, once you've solved the water crisis, your stomach starts making demands. And finding food on a deserted island? That's where pirates had to become part hunter, part gatherer, and part gambling addict, because eating the wrong thing could kill you faster than thirst ever would. Your stomach is growling, your mouth tastes like seawater, and you're staring at a deserted island that might become your grave. But here's the thing about pirates. They didn't survive the Caribbean's most dangerous waters by being picky eaters. Wild goats and pigs were absolute gold mines for stranded buccaneers. Earlier sailors had dumped these animals on islands as walking food supplies for future visits. Smart thinking, right? Pirates hunted them with nothing but knives, machetes, or crude spears whittled from driftwood. The trick was building simple traps near watering holes where animals came to drink. One goat could feed a pirate for weeks if he knew how to preserve the meat properly. But let's be honest, most pirates weren't exactly master hunters. They turned to the ocean's buffet instead. Tide pools became their grocery stores. Crabs, mussels, sea urchins, and small fish got trapped when the tide went out. Even a landlubber could grab dinner with his bare hands. Sea turtles were another jackpot, especially during nesting season when massive females crawled onto beaches. Then there's the fruit situation. Coconuts were obvious choices, but cracking them open without proper tools? That's harder than it looks. Pirates learned to slam them against rocks or sharpen sticks to pierce the shells. Mangoes, papayas, and wild berries provided vitamins that kept scurvy at bay. The problem was telling poisonous plants from edible ones. More than one pirate spent his final days writhing from toxic fruit he thought looked tasty. Here's where buccaneer wisdom really paid off. These weren't just random outlaws. Many had learned smoking techniques from Caribbean natives. They built smokehouses using driftwood and palm fronds, then cut meat into strips and dried it over low fires. This jerky could last weeks in tropical heat without spoiling. Pretty clever for guys who supposedly just drank rum and buried treasure. Shipwrecks were like finding a convenience store in the middle of nowhere. Barrels of salted pork, hardtack biscuits, and dried beans sometimes washed ashore intact. Pirates knew to check these wrecks immediately after storms, before other scavengers, both animal and human, picked them clean. The competition was fierce. Wild dogs, rats, and birds all wanted the same food sources. What's fascinating is how quickly these tough sailors adapted their palates. Seaweed became salad. Raw fish turned into sashimi centuries before it was trendy. Some even drank turtle blood when fresh water ran low, though that's definitely an acquired taste. Makes you appreciate your morning coffee, doesn't it? But finding food was only half the battle. The real challenge was staying alive while you ate it, because tropical islands had ways of killing you that went far beyond hunger. The blazing sun, disease-carrying insects, and sudden storms could end your survival story before you finished your first meal. Building shelter on a deserted island wasn't exactly like putting together IKEA furniture. No instruction manual, no little wooden pegs, and definitely no customer service hotline when things went wrong. Pirates had to work fast. The first night exposed to wind, rain, or blazing sun could kill you just as dead as a cutlass to the chest. Smart castaways grabbed whatever they could find, palm fronds, driftwood, massive tropical leaves, and threw together something resembling protection before darkness fell. Location mattered more than you'd think. Build too close to the water, and high tide turns your cozy hut into an underwater cave. Too far inland, and you're dealing with every biting, stinging, crawling creature the island has to offer. Pirates learned to find that sweet spot upwind from bug-infested swamps, but close enough to the beach for quick escapes. The real challenge? Caribbean weather doesn't mess around. One day, you're sweating buckets under blazing sun. The next, you're getting pummeled by winds that could knock a grown man flat. Hurricanes were the ultimate test. Flimsy lean-tos made from palm fronds might keep off morning dew, but they're about as useful as a chocolate teapot when Mother Nature throws her tantrums. That's where natural shelter became a lifesaver. Deep caves or rocky overhangs offered real protection during storms. Pirates who found these spots early had massive advantages over those stuck rebuilding grass huts every few weeks. But here's where it gets clever. Some pirates, like Alexander Selkirk, the guy who inspired Robinson Crusoe, built multiple shelters for different purposes. One hut for sleeping, another for cooking. Maybe a third for storing supplies. Smart thinking, really. You don't want smoke from your dinner fire choking you all night, and keeping food separate from sleeping areas meant fewer unwanted animal visitors. Animal hides changed everything when pirates could get them. Those wild goats weren't just dinner. Their skins became waterproof roofing, warm bedding, even crude blankets. Pirates learned to sew using bone needles and plant fibers, creating surprisingly effective gear. Takes patience, though, and plenty of pirates probably spent more time cursing their clumsy fingers than actually making progress. The truly desperate got creative with materials. Sailcloth from shipwrecks made excellent roofing. Broken barrels provided walls. Even seaweed could be woven into windbreaks when nothing else worked. Pirates became masters of making something from nothing because, frankly, they had no choice. Timing shelter construction around daily survival needs took real skill. Mornings for gathering materials, afternoons for building before the heat became unbearable, evenings for repairs and improvements. Miss this rhythm and you'd find yourself working in blazing sun or pitch darkness. Well, staying dry and protected was only half the battle. Even the best shelter couldn't help if disease, infection, or injury struck. Without proper medical care, even small wounds could turn deadly serious fast. Getting hurt on a deserted island wasn't just painful, it could be a death sentence. No ship's doctor, no medicine chest, no fancy treatments. Just you, your wits, and whatever nature happened to provide. Pirates became surprisingly good field medics out of pure necessity. When you slice your hand open on a sharp shell or coral, you can't exactly call for help. They'd tear strips from their shirts, assuming they still had shirts, and wrap wounds tight. The cleaner the cloth, the better. But beggars can't be choosers. Here's where it gets interesting, though. Many pirates actually knew more about medicinal plants than your average sailor. Years of raiding Caribbean islands taught them which leaves could fight infection. Tree sap worked wonders for sealing cuts. Some even learned to chew certain bark for pain relief, copying what they'd seen local people do. But the real killers weren't dramatic injuries. They were the everyday problems that slowly wore you down. Scurvy hit hard and fast without proper food. Your teeth would loosen, old wounds would reopen, and you'd feel weak as a newborn kitten. Smart pirates gorged on any citrus fruit they could find. Wild greens helped too, even if they tasted terrible. Better than losing your teeth, right? Then there were the burns. Tropical sun could fry exposed skin in hours, especially for men used to wearing shirts and working below deck. Pirates learned to cover up during peak hours and use mud or wet clay as makeshift sunscreen. Not exactly glamorous, but it worked. Insect bites drove some men nearly mad. Mosquitoes, sandflies, and things that bit in the night made sleep almost impossible. Clay again proved useful. Slapping it on bites reduced the itching and swelling. Some pirates even learned to make smoky fires that kept bugs away from sleeping areas. Animal attacks presented their own challenges. Wild boar, territorial birds, even aggressive crabs could inflict serious damage. Without proper antiseptic, any deep wound could turn septic within days. Pirates discovered that salt water, painful as it was, could clean wounds effectively. Toothaches were pure torture with no dentist around. Some desperate souls actually knocked out infected teeth using rocks or knife handles. Brutal, but sometimes necessary when the pain became unbearable. The strangest remedy? Many stranded pirates went completely barefoot after their boots fell apart. Surprisingly, their feet toughened up quickly on sand and smooth rock. When they needed protection, animal hides could be wrapped around feet with plant fibers or strips of cloth. Well, staying healthy was only half the battle. Even the toughest pirate needed rescue eventually, and that meant getting noticed by passing ships without attracting the wrong kind of attention. Being stuck on a deserted island was bad enough, but watching ships sail past without noticing you, that was pure torture. Pirates knew their survival depended on getting rescued, and they weren't about to wave politely and hope for the best. The most obvious solution was fire. But not just any fire. Pirates built massive signal fires on the highest points they could find, usually hilltops or rocky outcrops visible from miles away. The trick was adding green leaves, wet seaweed, or damp palm fronds to create thick, billowing smoke that screamed, "Help me," from 20 miles out. During the day, black smoke against blue sky was impossible to miss. At night, bright flames did the job. Well, assuming the wind cooperated and didn't blow the smoke straight down into your face. Pirates also turned into amateur flag makers when rescue was on the line. Any bright cloth they had, torn shirts, bandanas, even underwear if desperate, got tied to tall poles or trees. The brighter and more ridiculous looking, the better. Shiny objects worked too. Polished metal, mirrors, or anything reflective could catch sunlight and flash signals to distant ships. But here's where things got creative. Some stranded pirates arranged rocks, shells, or driftwood into giant patterns on beaches. Arrows pointing toward their location, large X marks, or even spelled out messages in the sand. These weren't sophisticated, but passing ships might spot them from their crow's nests during calm weather. The truly desperate ones tried building rafts to paddle out toward shipping lanes. Most of these attempts ended badly. Ocean currents were stronger than expected, storms came out of nowhere, and makeshift rafts fell apart in deep water. Pirates who tried this usually ended up swimming back to shore, assuming they made it back at all. Then there was the dangerous game of selective signaling. Pirates couldn't signal every ship that passed. Enemy vessels, naval patrols, or rival pirate crews might capture or execute them instead of rescuing them. Stranded pirates learned to identify friendly ships by their flags, size, or sailing patterns before revealing themselves. Sometimes they hid and watched for hours before deciding whether to risk signaling. Alexander Selkirk, the real-life inspiration for Robinson Crusoe, actually hid from the first ship he saw because it was Spanish. Smart move, since they probably would have arrested him. When a British ship finally appeared, he was ready with fires, flags, and probably some very enthusiastic shouting. The waiting game was brutal, though. Some pirates maintained signal fires for months, keeping dry wood ready and scanning horizons daily. Others gave up hope entirely and stopped trying. But even the most resourceful rescue attempts couldn't solve the biggest problem of all. While pirates focused on getting attention from passing ships, they still had to survive the mental battle that came with isolation. And that fight happened entirely inside their heads. Being stuck alone on a desert island wasn't just about finding food and water. The real enemy? Your own mind trying to drive you completely mad. Most stranded pirates lasted maybe 2 weeks before their brains started playing nasty tricks on them. They'd hear voices calling from the jungle, see ships on the horizon that weren't really there, or wake up screaming at imaginary enemies. The isolation hit harder than a cannonball to the chest. Smart pirates figured out early that keeping busy was the difference between survival and losing their marbles entirely. They'd wake up at the same time every morning, even without a clock. Some would carve a notch in a tree each day, counting the sunrise like it was their job. Others built elaborate schedules, checking traps at dawn, gathering firewood at noon, fishing at sunset. Alexander Selkirk, the real-life inspiration for Robinson Crusoe, spent over 4 years alone and stayed sane by talking to himself constantly. He'd give lectures to the goats, debate with the birds, and even argue with his own reflection in tide pools. Sounds crazy, but it worked perfectly. Then there were the pirates who got creative with imaginary friends. They'd build scarecrow-like figures from driftwood and rags, positioning them around their camps. Some even gave these fake companions names and would talk to them during meals. Well, beats eating alone in complete silence, right? Music became another lifeline for many stranded buccaneers. They'd sing every sea shanty they remembered, sometimes for hours. When they ran out of real songs, they'd make up new ones about their situation. Nothing like a good tune about eating raw crabs to keep the spirits up. But the weirdest part is how escape fantasies actually helped keep them mentally sharp. Pirates would spend entire afternoons planning elaborate rescue scenarios, building massive rafts, creating detailed maps of ocean currents, or designing signal systems. Even when these plans were completely unrealistic, the mental exercise kept their brains working. Some pirates took up strange hobbies to pass endless hours. They'd weave baskets from palm fronds, carve intricate sculptures from driftwood, or create elaborate games using shells and stones. One famous castaway spent months teaching a parrot to curse in 3 different languages. The ones who survived longest always had something to look forward to each day. Maybe it was checking a fishing line or watching for ships from a high cliff, or simply enjoying a particularly good sunset. Tiny goals, but they added up to reasons for living. Physical activity played a huge role too. Pirates would run along beaches, swim in lagoons, or climb trees just to keep their bodies moving. Exercise fought off the dark thoughts that crept in during quiet moments. The brutal truth: pirates who gave up hope usually died within a month, regardless of how much food and water they had available.